Yo, yo, yo. Are we ready? So, have to make a rhyme. I am Emily. Ready, Emily. I don't like this intro, but we're just gonna go. Rhymes. But no, so this is going to be my series. This is not part 2. Hello? Remember, I'm doing the video. Mother, if you could close the door, please. Or slam the door. She's doing Zoom, and she's not used to Zoom, so this is an adventure for her. But anyway, that is my life. This is my mom. But okay, so this is my little corny, cheesy, but hopefully fun and maybe entertaining or interesting series that I'm doing. So it's Take a College Class with Me, and this is an English course. It is basically analysis, research, literature, stuff like that. So I got 3 books right now, only been into a short guide to writing about literature and also literary criticism, an introduction to theory and practice, 5th edition, fun fact. The craft of research have not gotten into this. No assignments have involved that book right there. So, not like I'm going to read to you. This is not a book club, a read aloud. That's another thing, another time, another day. So, yes. Are we prepared? I am ready. I got my sweats on, ready to go. And English and online, this is just great. I get the best of both worlds. It's just perfect. I prefer being an online student versus an on-campus, face-to-face, in-person student. That's just my type, my personality. I'm just able to perform a lot cooler. I don't know. And then plus it's English, so obviously, that's an obvious one. I love English, that's my minor, and I want to write books. I write in my free time all the time. I have like 1,000,005 of a bajillion story ideas. But anyway, it was a fast week. Week 2, and it is Sunday, May 3rd, so happy May. We are now in May, and thankfully we are week 2, so gotta get to week 14 and then I'm done. But can't really complain because I find this genuinely interesting and I'm a nerd about English. So, what a fast week has been. Let's hope that the rest goes fast. But again, I am enjoying myself and I do find this fun, so it's not like it's terrible. It doesn't feel like school, it just feels like I'm gonna get a grade for something that I do anyway. It's just more structured and a little bit strict, obviously, compared to my everyday, like how I'm able to free write. Can't exactly do that with this. I believe there's gonna be 1, 2, I'll just count up, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 assignments, technically 9, but one is just like a repeat kind of. There was like the rough draft and then the actual assignment. So, a lot of formalism, some random quizzes talking about probable versus possible in analysis, and just some notes thrown in there, analysis, theme, extra credit as well. So, let's just go. And just like last week, my first week, after I had survived week 1 and the first vlog that I did for this series, just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to read to you basically my notes and my assignments because I'm a nerd and I want to record this moment and share this bizarre class, not bizarre class, but just bizarre thing with you. Okay, so this was just a reading that we did. This was on formalism. So I appreciated this reading and especially the new terms and definitions that I was able to learn about and take notes on. In my analysis, I will use several things that came from the reading and other things and ideas inspired by these readings. The unique lenses to look at literature and the parts of a poem or pieces of literary work, definitely some things that I want to talk about and focus on. This was a very helpful reading and I was able to learn a lot and take several notes, and all this will really help me with my analysis. There are several basic beliefs and goals of formalism / new criticism to know and understand. New criticism is seeing the literary work or text as an object. Formalism does not look at, pay attention to, or care much about the historical aspect or context, nor anything of that nature. They look at the text alone and the text specifically. They do not analyze much past that. They look for facts and look at facts, and it is a fairly simple process rather than the other ways to look at literature, text, and poetry. It is more black and white and even without much feeling. There are several elements that make up a poem's form. They can be voice, diction, paradox, imagery, figures of speech, symbolism / allegory, syntax, sound, rhyme/meter, rhyme scheme, and structure. Form is very important to formalists because formalists need as much information as they can get in order to dissect the literary work based on facts. They look past and don't look for things like feeling. They want meaning and fact and not fantasy or fiction or feeling. They don't tie emotion with the words. They look at the text for what it is. When they have many noticeable parts of the poem, they can do their job of formalist well and successfully. Diction is very important in formalism. Diction is the overall language of the poem. This includes vocabulary. Words offer feelings. Certain words provide certain feelings. Formalism looks at and pays a specific attention to the facts and the text itself, not wanting to focus on feeling. They see the words plainly. You look for metaphors when you analyze diction and poetry. Diction in poetry is all about metaphors within the poem, metaphors that make up the poem. Formalists want to objectively analyze the text, and they do this with diction. Formalists need diction so that they have something to analyze. The principle of unity is a harmony and order within something, in this case poetry. To have unity, a poem is authentic and has an aesthetic to it. Verbal icon plays a big role in this area: sound, texture, structure, rhetoric, and a host of other literary devices. This brings about unity in poetry. You analyze unity in poetry by essentially looking at and taking into account all of the parts and pieces of the poem. You are comparing and contrasting the different and unique parts of the poem with, for, and against each other. Piece compared to piece, you are dissecting the poem piece by piece. You could say that a formalist would avoid feeling in analysis. Formalists focus on the text itself and not much outside that. Unlike romanticism, I know that is a problem. The formalist does not focus on or try to find and dissect the author's feelings. Naturalism is the focus on the philosophical and scientific thought. New humanists value morals and the morals within works of art. Feeling and meaning are different, though can be related. In this instance, the formalist will look for meaning within the poem, but they will avoid and ignore feeling. They want facts over feeling and meaning over opinion. This is because they are wanting to look at the poem through a logical lens. I hardly even stuttered. Yeah, I'm getting used to you guys, finally. No, just kidding. It's like the more comfortable I get around people, the more I stutter, which should be the other way around. Well, it should not. Should be. That's the wrong word to use. Whatever. But yeah, I'm kind of forgetting about this assignment. This was way early in the week. Anyway, so some notes. Don't want this to be too long-winded, but that's just like me. Okay, and this is only pages 43 through 50, and I wrote like a lot. So define explication, I think it is, main include paraphrase, so unfolding, spreading out. Writers want to communicate, guide your reader's response, unfold the meaning or meanings, plural. Unfulfilled hopes or dreams deferred, Langston Hughes, Harlem. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun or fester like a sore? This is a poem, by the way. And then run. Does it stink like rotten meat or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? So notice both ends and begins with a question pointed out by a student. So that was in my notes from another student within my book. Example, emphatic, I like that word. Word by word and comma by comma. It's important to know in poetry. Remember these helps: computer, typing, make several copies, type and write double-spaced. Preliminary jottings is important. We read a poem upside down, like a building upside down. So like an example, the title is the foundation at the top, but really at the bottom, last line is the roof. So it's just an upside down house or whatever. explication, I think, I can't pronounce it, to analyze, and the moon with and June, and dove with and dove. That doesn't really make sense. So moon with June, dove and love, just like fun rhyming words, just fun examples. So that there was that there was that, okay. And now just moving on, this is chapter 3. Poem structure like that of architecture/painting. It is a pattern of resolved stresses. Literary work was once judged harshly, and that perspective changed in the 20th century. Example, Russian formalism. So to study literature is to study poetics. This is a quote. An analysis of a work's constituent parts, its linguistic and structural features, or its form. Literariness is a word. Literary language foregrounds itself, shouting, "Look at me, I'm special, I'm unique." Some literary devices, structure, imagery, syntax, rhyme scheme, paradox, etc. So, mentioned those before. Defamiliarization, the process of making strange or ostronymic, can't pronounce that, the familiar, of putting the old in new light, sphere of new perception. Estrangement example, I like that word. Re-examine the image, that's important. Think this. Unusual pairing of the words to make dazzling darkness. Some of these notes just don't make sense and they're random. Enter in the poet's world, author's choice of language. We must unpack the meaning of the author's choice of language. Our ordinary experience of everyday language is slowed down. Fabula, and just gonna spell it. Syuzhet. That's how you spell it. Don't know what it is. So I guess story and plot is what it is. There we go. Techniques could be digressions, surprises, disruptions, fresh view of language and or the reader's world. Russian formalism theory is a re-evaluation of the text itself. Formalists redefined a text, a unified collection of various literary devices/conventions that can be objectively analyzed. And then continuing, suppressed, disbanded in 1930 by the Soviet government because unwilling to view literature through the, looks like it's Stalinist, whatever, regimes, political, ideological perspectives. What is the meaning of the title? Questions to ask. What is the title's relationship to the rest of the poem? Look at words, phrases, sentences. What does the poem mean? Example, denotative, connotative meanings. Allusions within the text. Figures of speech, figure of speeches. Figures of speech or figure of speeches. That's like, is it Books of Mormon or Book of Mormons? That's like an LDS joke for my church. Public or private symbols. How interrelates. New criticism formula for arriving at correct interpretation of the text by just the text itself. Now the study's back. Become a close reader of text/text. A poem has an emotional state. Values or morals of both the author and the reader. Modernism, formalism, aesthetic criticism, textual criticism, ontological criticism is a thing. Challenge, borrow, change. An author's life greatly influences their writing. Appreciate the text for its beauty. Impressionistic critics believe how we feel, what we personally see, think, feel, and a work of art matters, perhaps the most. Naturalism, philosophical, scientific thought. New humanists value the moral qualities of art, moral values exhibited in a text. Romanticism, artists' feelings, attitudes, personal visions, the expressive school. The text and text alone approach. Authors' biographical, social, cultural concerns, all can be analyzable. Poets are like practitioners, poem over the poet. Personality and emotion in poems or poetry that are common to all mankind. Poetry is not a feeling of the poet's emotions, but an escape from them. Poetry unites the poet's impressions and ideas with all humanity. A good reader is a good critic. Metaphysical poets, be well acquainted with established poetic traditions. Poor reader, they only express personal emotions and reactions to a text. Objective, correlative, staple in poetic jargon. Reminds me of this jerk face, his last name. Use chain of events. The author desires specific emotional response. Indirect, impersonal. Looks like a page and a half left. Scrutiny of text. Imaginative literature is valuable. Engage yourself in authentic experience. Poetry and writing leads to truth. It is discoverable, distinguishable, discernible. Science speaks propositionally. Poetic truth, imagination, and intuition. Mundane, practical concerns end and stop with poetry. From rhetorical, doctrinal, propositional statements. Language, logic of science, far different than poetry's knowledge and avenues to truth. What is the poem's or poet's object of concern? Poem equals works of art. Poem, ontological status, that is, it possesses its own being and exists like any other object. Poem becomes artifact, objective, self-contained, autonomous entity, verbal icon, sound, texture, structure, rhetoric, and host of other literary devices. I feel like I already said that. Objective theory of art. Fundamental error when we think that all a poem is the poet's experiences and intentions. Intentional, I think it's fallacy. The poem is an object. Dogmatism defined, so I have to look that up still. That the poem is somehow related to its author cannot be denied. Poet's mind, a catalyst for the reaction that yields the poem. During the creative process, they bring their personality into the poem. Experiences of the author's personality, experiences of the author, similar to all of our experiences. Unearth the biographical data. When was the poem authored? Another word, etymology, weird. 15th century terms. Nice really means foolish, that's a fun fact. Look into Oxford English Dictionary, cites a words, multiple historical meanings chronologically, so that would be a fun dictionary. Error in judgment, affective fallacy. Relativism, oh goodness. Belief that a poem has innumerable valid interpretations. The poem is only within itself, meaning does not rely on anything or anyone else. Analyze the poem scientifically. Accordingly, those are words I like. Poem, standard of excellence. The meaning of poems evolve. The poet and organizer of the content of human experience. That's the new criticism. Craft a poem, stir readers' emotions. Poets are artists. It begins with the structure, poem's overall oneness. Superior poetry, paradox, irony, ambiguity, I think. It is all form. Form is unique, organic unity. Poem, what it says versus how it says it. Isolate, separate parts of or within the poem. I think it's hearsay of paraphrase. Poem is not true or false, not a mere simple statement, and encapsulate. Another word I like. So, there's that guy. Can't believe that was just the first one. Okay, I'm gonna get up again. This time, I'm interrupting myself. Wow, 18 minutos. I'm so good at Spanish, guys. Okay. Let's go here. Thankfully, these other assignments are brief. Don't want to talk your ear off or annoy you. Okay. So this is just a mini quiz, just a one paragraph assignment. So you could look at this topic like a puzzle or a recipe. There's an order to it, and it takes both time and practice. Pieces in literature are the literary devices in individual works. Whole in literature is other literary devices. This includes theme within literary work and themes across literary work. The main focus of the whole is comparing and contrasting works. When analyzing a literary work, you may look at and judge the literary periods and era. You must sort out the text in order to analyze a literary work and go through the process of pieces and whole. You will also want to look at and pay attention to characterization, setting, tone, and structure form. One example of piece whole is the idea, how does A accomplish B in the text? Again, it is analyzing and comparing, and analyzing through comparing. The key to pieces and whole in literary works is to compare and contrast A versus B and see how they relate and differ and what they have to do with each other and how they affect each other. So, I feel like I'm starting to get good with my L's. My L's are hard for me still, but it's like literature, literary, trying to say it, you know. And also, something else, little fun fact about me and my assignments and how my brain works. Sometimes, and I've met people like this, I think really everybody knows at least someone like this, at least one person like this, where they're talking and they're saying a lot without really saying anything. And I feel like that's how some of my assignments and responses can come across, like being repetitive, not explaining very well. That can be kind of hard. So that was the piece versus whole quiz, and now we're going to get into probable or possible quiz. So we'll do that. Let me just see something. And then we'll go back to piece versus whole very briefly, and I think these other assignments will hopefully be faster. This one, probably not so fast. I have to do part 2, I'm so sorry for that. Okay, and it's sad. This is only like 10 pages, but what can you do? So this is about literature, form, and meaning. Well, like the assignment was 10 pages, and the notes add up to 7, so, but then there's the instructions at the bottom. Anyway. So this is from Ezra Pound. Great literature is simply language charged with meaning to the utmost possible degree. Quote. Now something else. Text. Literary work, newspaper, textbook, atlas, just different outlets of text. This is Lady Murasaki's, I don't know, The Tale of Genji, I don't know again. Often called the world's first novel. A quote. Again and again, something in one's own life or in the life of someone or around one, good grief, this is confusing, will seem so important that one cannot bear to let it pass into oblivion. There must never come a time, the writer feels, when people do not know about this. Literature is about human experiences. Authors give readers things to value. Form and content are inseparable. Literature is news that stays news. That's from Ezra Pound. Simple info versus memorable and unforgettable news. An example is John Loves Mary. The writer selects what is essential and makes us care about the characters. These works are not exclusively about those ages or environments. They speak to later readers. An example of Joys and Sorrows, like a story like the love affair of Romeo and Juliet. It's interested people for 400 years. Our opinion of the text will, odds are, change with time and when reread, and that's terrible to read. It doesn't flow. Characters in literature, most usually imaginary, although they may seem real. One reason that literature works endure, whether they show us what we are or what we long for, is that their form makes their context memorable. Example is proverb. Example, another one, brief, popular spoken text. And then a rolling stone gathers no moss, or if a stone is always moving around, vegetation won't have a chance to grow on it. A nice contrast, hard stone and soft moss, just more examples. What makes the original version more powerful, more memorable? T.S. Eliot said, genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. That was in one of his books. Indeed, our first reading of, that was Dante, yeah. Indeed, our first reading of a work when we are all eyes and ears, and the mind is highly receptive rather than sifting for evidence, sometimes the most important reading. Experience proves that we can feel the effects of a work without yet understanding how the effects are achieved. So literature, a performance in words, that's what Robert Frost said. What the sentence is no less significant than what the sentence says. Example, inorganic and organic. Writing literature, simple yet complex, and you will learn why. Expands our minds. Example, Proverbs, look before you leap, finders keepers, haste makes waste, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Paraphrase a proverb and then compare yours with the original, asking yourself why the original is more interesting or memorable. Look up English proverbs and sayings, because it's interesting. Maybe instead of saying literature, I'll just say lit for short, and for time, because that's clearly going to chop off a bunch of time. Okay, so lit, pleases the mind and the tongue. Content and meaning, watch for, also images and sounds. The words also always add up to something. Proverb contains a good deal of truth, and it certainly is not always true. Proverb, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Proverbs can contradict other proverbs, like too many cooks spoil the broth, yet many hands make light the work. And then absence makes the heart grow fonder, yet out of sight, out of mind. And then another, he who hesitates is lost, but look before you leap. Lit does not give us the truth. Rather, it wakes us up, makes us see, helps us feel intensely some aspect of our experience, and perhaps evaluate it. From Franz, I believe, Kafka. If the book we are reading does not wake us, as with a fist hammering on our skull, why then do we read it? What we must have are those books which come upon us like ill fortune and distress us deeply, like the death of one we love better than ourselves. A book must be an ice axe to break the sea frozen inside us. Saying, there are no flies on him, don't stagnate. Whatever. Northrop Frye, reading is a picnic to which the reader brings the words and the reader brings the meanings. Difference in opinions and interpretations over works like Hamlet and the Bible. However, if readers can never absolutely prove the truth of their interpretations, all readers have the obligation to make as convincing a case as possible. Why do you hold the opinion you do? You have to offer plausible supporting evidence, and you have to do so in a coherent and rhetorically effective essay. Try to, you want to, win over your readers. Robert Frost said, in The Span of Life, the old dog barks backward without getting up. I can remember when he was a pup. So think performance in words, example, dog, lore. Now you can't look at dogs the same, all because of a poem. Also think effect of aging differently, so a poem can really change your view, your opinion forever. Other students thought, no one reads or understands the poem the same as another. Part of what makes the poem effective is that this point is not stated explicitly, not belabored. Readers have the pleasure of making the connection for themselves under the writer's careful guidance. But because of the counterpoint, the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Skill in handling language, obviously, is indispensable if the writer is to produce literature, lit. Knowledge and love, not enough to write and read or understand lit. Like other kinds of lit, poems are produced by people who know how to delight us with verbal performances. Example, manipulation of words, cultural studies, their social, political context, even economic. And then example, science fiction, western sermons, political addresses, interviews, advertisements, comic strips, bumper stickers versus nonverbal products, which are like sports events, architecture, fashion design, automobiles, the offerings in a shopping mall. And then 2 more thoughts and moving on. So 2 more notes. Discursive practice versus signifying practice, and then production, distribution, and consumption. So we'll go here. I decided to digest and dissect and really analyze the second to last paragraph. One can totally and completely believe that the writer of this analysis is probable in their essay. The writer's conclusions about the piece as a whole are very probable. The writer compares and contrasts Jenny's worship of herself and her beauty and overall church worship. The writer also stresses on the pride of both the loose and Jenny. I don't know if it's loose or loose. I know it's like basically lice. But anyway, this is just about a poem. This is a very strong analysis as it is an obvious topic to see. One can only see success in this paragraph and in the overall essay, although there is one area that one may find rather questionable and risky of the writer, and that would be the fact that the writer mentions how the poet of the poem they're analyzing essentially speaks to the audience at one point. The writer mentions how the shift in audience abruptly changes the poem's tone from satirical, like satire, to serious, then goes on to quote from the poem. The writer quotes from the poem a fair amount and mentions how the poet chooses to speak to their audience more personally. However, more could have been said. This area is such a big idea that there needs to be more analyzing and critiquing and sharing of ideas. The writer could have easily said more and come to their own conclusions instead of being repetitive with their thoughts and basically only quoting from the poem itself. Aside from this area within the essay, the writer was very successful and believable, and their ideas were probable. We as writers have to be careful about how we go about speaking to our audience. And then words I like, love, appreciate, admire, adore, just random notes on the side. So I love and appreciate the quotes and sayings found within the readings. So lit is about human experiences, lit is news that stays news, lit a performance in words. These readings are helping me to get to know literature better and develop my relationship with lit. Thus in turn will help with my own